How's it going, Grady Nation? Chris Thomas here. Hope you're having a great day kind of day. And my guest on this installment of Grady Nation is Kanika Issar. She is the host of the You What podcast. It's a podcast debuting here in January 2022, and it's attempting to rebrand divorce and modern relationships. To learn more, go to You What Podcast. That's YOUWHT podcast.com. Kanika, how are you?
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you.
Well, I'm delighted that you agreed to be on because, divorce is a serious point of conversation, but it sounds like you want to take a fun approach to the topic, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I wanted to start with, how you came to be who you are, your development in life. You've been to Russia. You did your university studies in the United States. How has coming from India and going all around the world been an asset in your personal development and growth?
Yeah, I think I had a very fortunate, privileged life, and I'm aware of that. I am grateful for it. Uh, I grew up there. I moved to the US for college, actually. I went to Ohio, and it was fabulous. People always ask me how I liked it. It was really fun. It was a great place to go to school, actually. And right after I graduated, I moved to New York, and I've been working here ever since. I did end up getting married in New York and divorced in New York, and here that's eventually what led me to this because I think I was young when I got married of my own choice. People often assume that because I'm Indian, maybe I had an arranged marriage. Absolutely not. I was married to an American, and it was completely my own choice and my own doing, so to speak. At 23, and then I ended up getting a divorce a few days before my 27th birthday. So it all happened really quickly, but it taught me so much. And I think, getting divorced at 27 and feeling like my whole life was still ahead of me really made me realize that for some reason not for some reason, I mean, there's many reasons why, but there's a stigma and there's a way that people think about divorce, and it just didn't match how I felt. In my head, I was still young and cool, and so I feel like that narrative has to change. And just there's things that you can laugh about and joke about, and I am a really chatty, funny person. I feel, at least I make myself laugh. So just want to bring some of that humor and sort of normalize divorce, and sometimes it needs to be celebrated. So that's, I hope I answered you, but that's essentially how I got here.
Well, in terms of my thinking, it was just that with your global travels, and I'll continue on with the line of questioning because, I mean, you were a swimmer at the College of Worcester in Ohio. What was it
Yes.
like? What was it like living in Ohio, and how did you get to New York?
Yeah, you really did your research there, Chris. That must have been on like page 6 of Google. But yes, you're right. I was actually on the dive team. I've been involved in swimming through high school as well in India. It was just something I was part of in school. So when I went to college, I really wasn't planning on doing any D3, any kind of sports stuff because it's a lot more serious. People there's like serious practice and things. But I was actually in the pool just trying to dive and just remember what it was like. And the coach happened to be at the pool, and she asked me if I wanted to join the team. This was my sophomore year. And I said, sure, why not? It seems interesting and clicky. Let's try it. And so I did, and that's how I ended up with the swimming aspect in Ohio. Ohio is a place, was really beautiful, and I think it's a part of America that I would never have seen had I not gone to school there. Do you know what I mean? We ended up, people are gonna be in Vegas, California, New York, Chicago, Boston, but you don't really go to Ohio unless you have family or a reason to go there. And I actually really enjoyed that part of college. It was a small liberal arts school, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with my experience there. But you know how they say the people are really nice, they really are nice. And there were these cute little Amish buggies going. It was a really different experience, honestly. Very, very interesting part of America, but still very much so America. And it made me have a more holistic view of the country and kind of understand that America isn't just a New York or an LA, or what we see in the media. There's a lot more to the people of America, and so that was interesting, for sure.
Now, when your ex met, were you still a swimmer or a diver, I should say?
No, I wasn't. I met him in New York, and
Oh, okay.
ever
So
since I
that's how you
moved,
got to New York.
exactly, yep. So in New York, I wasn't really swimming or diving.
So how do you move from Ohio to New York?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a lot of friends who went to school around New York City, in Vassar, in Bard, in Connecticut, in Wesleyan. So I knew people, and then I had family, a distant family, my mom's cousin essentially, living on Long Island. So I would visit the city a lot, and it just felt like home. It was the only place I could imagine myself living permanently if I lived here. And it was just a very automatic extension. I mean, I had so many couches I could crash on. I had enough people to move week to week till I figured it out. So I moved to New York, and I didn't really have a plan. I kind of was just crashing at different people's couches, and eventually convinced somebody to hire me to work for them. And I did a little bit of data analysis and things like that. And then eventually one thing led to another. I found myself in the restaurant industry, which is what happens in New York. I think a lot of people touch that industry. Very humbling experience. And I also met my ex-husband along the way. We decided to move in together really quickly. It was pretty quick. Everything happened in a short period of time. And then we decided to get married, and then I continued working. I moved out of the restaurants eventually. I worked for Tiffany's, the jewelry company, and now I'm here.
Where is here?
Well, here is trying to make my own podcast. I also work for a liqueur brand, and I'm kind of helping scale that business. But I'm at an intersection where I'm trying to figure out if I can sort of freelance. I feel like, Chris, a lot of people are now, especially post pandemic, we've been given a taste of, what it's like to be your own boss and kind of live by your own dreams, your own desires, and pursue your own goals on your own time. And I think it's just it's just made it more possible and attainable, easily attainable for a lot of people. It's normalized the fact that you can work from anywhere, and that it's healthy to take time off. And do you know what I mean? So I think that was a really, in my opinion, very positive change that came out of the pandemic. So I'm sort of at this crossroads where I need to figure out how I'm going to essentially pay my bills and still work for myself.
So you hopefully would like to expand the podcast and be known as a major content creator.
I would like to, yeah. It's interesting launching a new podcast. I'm not sure how much of this you want to get into, but I feel like I just remind myself about the purpose of it. Sometimes I don't like thinking too much about the financial aspect or using that as a financial tool, at least not now, because it kind of deters me, and I just want to keep reminding myself, if it reaches people and it makes a difference, that will make me happy. But at the end of the day, if I was able to make money doing that, I think that would be really nice. That would be rewarding. It would free up a lot of my time, but I feel like I would do that even if I didn't make money. So I try, for my own sake, to just kind of uh just to reprioritize how I think of the podcast, and I don't want to get ahead of myself with it as yet.
Well, as of the time of this interview, it's already ranked in Apple Podcasts in India in the relationships category, and there's only been a trailer that's out. So that's a positive sign. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Your research is real. You've done a really good job researching me. I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes on myself, but also on how I can prepare for my interviews.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely a preparer.
Yeah. But Chris, you bring up something really interesting. When I haven't it hasn't officially launched yet, as you brought up, right? It's very tricky to figure out who my audience will be. I know that there's going to be I grew up there. I mean, my friends, my family, it's automatically a huge base for me. But so is New York, and so is American. And so it's interesting because those are very different experiences, especially when it comes to divorce and marriage, right? So it's tricky
Yeah.
to figure out who I'm catering to, especially when I'm having guests on, and I'm sort of imagining what my audience will be like. And it's an interesting point that you bring up, because I feel like down the road, as the journey progresses, I might catch myself pivoting and really serving a different audience than I had in mind. A lot of people have brought up, the diaspora, that is Indians living in other countries. For all I know, there could be like a huge Australian following. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, it's interesting. It's like I'm on a journey with my eyes are closed, sort of, and like we'll see where I end up.
And that's the exciting part, and that's partially why I asked that question about your global travels. And this next question is also about your global experience, because you volunteered for Aperons. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. That's a
Yes.
group. That's a group in Latvia, and it serves people with disabilities. How do you think that experience shaped who you are today?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll have to give you a little bit of background about that one. There's a award program. It's called the Duke of Edinburgh. It was called the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme for the Commonwealth countries, essentially, but it's now called the International Award Program. It's basically something that you do after the age of I believe 14 or something. I forget the exact age, but it's a set of skills. It's a number of hours you have to dedicate to social service, to a skill, to trekking, to so there's different categories. And essentially, one of the service trips I had to do was a camp in Russia. So I went to Russia for this camp, and there was one other brother and sister there from Latvia, which is where I eventually went to volunteer. But I met them, and then we went. I came to America for college, and then my after my freshman year, I wanted to do something different, and so I found this organization, Apparons, online. They were willing to have me there as a volunteer. So I actually managed to convince the Center of Entrepreneurship at my college that I wanted to do this, and so I need to raise funding. So they let me kind of do some funding stuff to get money to sponsor my trip. And then I went to Aperons, and to be honest with you, there was no specific reason why I picked that organization. It's just that they were one of the few that spoke English and responded to my request. So I was a really keen Indian who wants to volunteer in Latvia. And once I went there, it really opened my eyes to what it's like to live in. It's called it's for invalidu, which means basically handicapped or differently abled people. And it taught me a lot about infrastructure for people in wheelchairs, small things. Like, I remember one of the days the boss there asked me to just sit in a wheelchair and roam around the old town. It's a really old European city. And I didn't realize things like the left arm really hurts a lot more because all the pavements are slanted so that the water goes a certain way. There's just like tiny little details. Just the old cobble roads that look so beautiful are absolutely impossible to navigate in a wheelchair. So it taught me a lot about that. And then to bring it all back, the it I had a project later on in college where we had to do something to raise awareness. And essentially what I did was I built an obstacle course, because obviously in America a lot of things are more accessible, especially in a college campus. Um, so I built an obstacle course, and then all the students just had to navigate. And it wasn't really an complicated obstacles. It was just real everyday problems that you would face if you were really in a wheelchair. So that's I don't know if I just went off on a tangent, but that is what that was. And that's what I learned from it. I can't really say that the only thing I did do is I made a list of I was a tour guide in college. As you can see, I love talking, so I was chit chatting over there too. But I built an accessible map for people who are visiting the college, if they needed any what do you call it, if they needed any help with their disabilities and how they can access things, and just an accessible tour route. Did I lose you?
Did you? Oh no, no. I'm very engaged because you've lived a very full life at 27 years. multiple lifetimes compared to some other people. Now, just in terms of all of your travels, did you ever encounter discrimination in any way?
Not really. And I know that I feel strange saying that, but I don't think so. And I think partially maybe because I was just so blinded to it. Maybe I just wasn't aware. And also maybe I just didn't get offended because, for example, there were things that people would bring up after the fact. I'll give you an example. People would say something like we'd have these little group sessions in college, and someone would stand up and say, "Oh, I was giving this family a tour, and just because someone's from another country, they turned around and said, 'Oh, your English is. I'm surprised how great your English is.'" And of course, I was told that before, but I didn't really know that that was not okay. Do you know what I mean? So I I feel very lucky to say I don't think I have been discriminated against. I know that sounds really bizarre. And like it's probably not true, but not to my like not maybe I don't know. That sounds terrible.
No, I mean, you may not have been consciously aware
Yes, I
that
think
you
so.
were encountering discrimination, but also, I mean, not to flatter the guest, but I mean, you are a beautiful woman, and oftentimes, I think people who have a certain look aesthetically do get treated differently, and so
Yeah.
that could be a factor tied to it.
You're right. I think, I mean, of course, the classic, gender discrimination. Of course, that set that everybody's dealt with. Yes, I've definitely experienced that. But you bring up an interesting point. I didn't want to say it because I don't want to come across as,
Oh,
but I'm so sorry about that. But I think what's interesting about what you say is, on one hand, yes, you do get in some ways treated better, but something I have experienced for sure is because you look a certain way, people undermine how well you might perform your job. For many interviews, I would make it a point to look slightly, to wear glasses, to do things to look different, because for some reason they would assume that you're not as good or as capable or as whatever, you can fill in the blank. When you go into a meeting, you want to be taken seriously, but you can't be taken seriously. Like, does that make sense? It's like a reverse. And I'm not asking for a free handout or anyone's pity, but I'm just saying this is real. And you have to make a double an effort to do all your work even better, so that no fingers pointed at you saying, "Oh, but she."
no, Kanika, I understand where you're coming from because as a beautiful woman, oftentimes people are going to stereotype you and not treat you as a person of substance. And you have something to say, you have something to offer, you're intelligent, you're capable. And so they may, just make an assumption that, oh, well, she's just someone who gets by because of her looks and not because, you have a lot to offer. So I think there's something to that.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I don't really know what might have been said behind the door, and so a lot of this is also just sort of in the ether. I can't really comment on it. I would be stupid. I would be unwise to say no. Nothing like that has happened. Of course, I'm sure it has, but like I said, I don't know how aware I am of it.
No, definitely. And I think this was an interesting look into who you are. So let's transition into the podcast itself. Why do you think there is a need to rebrand divorce?
I was waiting for you to ask me. It's when I got divorced, it sounds like it was a long time ago, but honestly, with the pandemic, it does feel like it was a long time ago. It was 2 days before my 27th birthday when I left, right? And not to minimize anybody's pain, of course, I had hard days too, but that's not what I'm focusing on right now. What I realized was everything online was depressing. It was like, who gets the kids, who gets the house, who gets the like car. And my ex-husband and I, like, we had none of that. We were just really unsuccessful, though I say that in my trailer. But it's I couldn't relate to these things. And what I was looking for was something a lot lighter, something like something silly. I remember the day I left, not there's no guide to, you know how you take those silly quizzes on BuzzFeed and it tells you what kind of a pizza should you be, or 10 things to do the day you get divorced, like just silly stuff. And I didn't find any of that online. I couldn't find any jokes. I couldn't find any, nothing light. And like, it's not that I didn't have feelings or I didn't feel bad, but that's just how I cope with things. And that's how and I wanted someone relatable, someone like me, someone, you know, excited about life, someone who felt the same way, like your life is just beginning and like you haven't even started yet. I couldn't find any of that. Everything, like I said, was depressing. I searched everywhere. I searched for podcasts. I searched everywhere that I normally search for information. I searched online. There was stuff out there, not to poo poo the things that are out there. They just weren't the vibe that I was looking for, and they weren't exciting and they weren't fun. And so I realized that I can't, not realize, not I can't, it's factual. Statistically, I'm not the only young person getting divorced. It's actually really, really common. I say this in my show all the time. You know, statistically in the US, about 50% of couples are going to get a divorce, a little bit more than 50. Not to mention all the people that are in terrible relationships that wish they were getting a divorce. So it's actually really common. And the thing is, like, it is stigmatized. And had I not been divorced, even I was somebody who probably would have thought, oh no, she got divorced, her life is probably over, or his life is probably over, or you just have pity and sadness. And everybody from a place of love and concern in my life looked at me like, oh my god, like, are you eat they just had this like pity in their eyes. And I on the other hand was like, no, 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 you don't understand. I'm happier today than I was the day I got married. I feel like I took my life back. I feel like I've got another lease on life. I've got another chance. It's not over. And I know that I wasn't the only person that felt that way. And then it took me a while, because there was a lot of me talking myself in and out of whether or not I should do a podcast. And it is a delicate subject, personal subject. But I realized that there has to be other people out there, and if I couldn't find something like this, like, someone has to make it for all these other people and let them know that you can actually be really fun, and life goes on. And in fact, life just begun, and what you did was a really courageous, strong thing. you know in our society, for the most part, we only we count success, especially in a partnered relationship, as a long-term marriage. But the fact is, it's not only the only measure of success doesn't have to be linear time. There can be relationships that were wildly successful for 3 years, and then the people respectfully moved on. Do you know what I mean? The only measure, it doesn't have to, the only metric doesn't have to be literally one person dying for you to say your relationship was better. So, or I don't like better because that's comparative, but your relationship was a success. Do you know what I mean? I think we need to change that. I don't think we're living in a time like where people, also the element of people having to put up with something. Times are changing. I mean, society is changing. Women are more mobile and are able to support themselves, don't have to have children as young, can leave the house without having to get married to whoever lived in the neighborhood that was of their age. So things are changing. And I think our thinking about marriage and what that looks like, and what the institution of marriage looks like, and how we feel about divorce needs to change too. Because we can't apply a set of rules and principles that worked potentially, even probably then, not very well for everybody in society, but to a large extent a society based in, like, 200 years ago. How are we still using the same machinery for our marriage today? And how can we apply those same standards to everybody? How can every single person on this earth be expected to subscribe to the same, like, process or procedure, and then expect to be happy? And I think people are questioning that a lot more now, and I think that we should celebrate it. And that this isn't to say that I'm against long-term heterosexual monogamous marriage. Absolutely not. I think that's beautiful. I just don't think it's for everybody. And I think that people have a choice. People should always have a choice. And I think even people in monogamous relationships should always choose. You should wake up 2 years later and decide, do I still want this? And the answer should be yes. It's not something that you own. Like, this whole concept of owning somebody and then forever being betrothed to them, and involving the state, is just, and it's funny because I sit here saying it after I did exactly that, right? But it made me question everything. So I'm not sitting here saying I'm any better or worse. If anything, I'm probably worse for having done that. But it's just made me think about these things a lot.
So it sounds like you might be viewing marriage as an antiquated concept. Does this mean that as of right now, marriage is not in the cards for your future? Was the experience such that you don't really feel like the need to get married again?
Uh, you know, my answer to that question evolves every couple of months. Sometimes it regresses. I'm not really sure. It depends on how you look at it. But I think, like, more so than what whether or not I would get married again, I think we should take a step back and figure out what, like, think about what it is that we're doing. I think that if we need to be a little, we as in like the plurals, universe, everybody in the world, we need to figure out what we're doing and be intentional about it. Like, do we really know what we're doing when we're getting married? We don't. Where we You can have a marriage and a partnership without involving the state, but the thing is, we don't really know what we're getting into until, God forbid, someone's getting a divorce or someone's dying. In terms of a legal contract, I'm not talking about somebody and their partner together. You ask me about myself, I don't know. And I'm not sure. I think that I'm a monogamous person and I enjoy having a partner, but I kind of am exploring this concept theoretically. I don't have any, applications yet, but theoretically, this idea of serial monogamy, maybe I could be with somebody for 15, 20 years and have an amazing life together. And then, maybe you don't have to resent and hate that person and dissolve and wait for them to die. Maybe both agree that, we could do something. I'm really not sure, but the point is, I'm at least considering other alternatives to this. Like if I met somebody and they really wanted to get married, I would really have to sit down and figure out why do you want to get married. But the thing is, we still live in a society, like I was saying, that have so many systems in place that reinforce marriage. You literally get tax breaks. I mean, so there's so you get loans, there are so many things. You get houses, you get apartments, you can't apply for the board or certain there's a lot of things that you just can't do the same if you're not married. So maybe those things are going to change too. I'm really not sure, but what I can tell you is I am questioning it now, and I'm not just going to blindly prescribe to that because everybody is doing it and that's what should be done. I just want to kind of understand why and what I'm doing.
Are you, when from that answer, do you have a new relationship then?
No, with myself, yes. but
Oh, okay. Because when you said a partner, I was thinking, oh, you've already transitioned into a new relationship.
Nope. But I do have a fabulous new relationship with myself. I think I learned a lot about myself, and I think that's really, I know everybody's different, but I think it's really important. Whether or not you're divorced, my podcast is about divorce, but it's really about dissolution of any relationship, honestly. You don't have to, legally get divorced to relate. You can be in other kinds of relationships that have fallen. You could be dating for years. I mean, some of my friends have been in serious dating relationship for 10 years, and when they broke up, I kind of felt like they were getting divorced. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh, definitely.
your
Yeah.
friends, your family, everybody is so integrated. You have all these memories. So, like, just because it's as serious, let's just say it's as serious as a divorce. So sorry, I forget what you asked me. I digressed.
Oh,
No,
no,
I don't have
not
a
at all.
partner. So
No,
yes, my
you're
relationship
talking
with
about,
myself.
yeah, you were talking about self empowerment, and the experience helped you learn more about yourself. Thing.
Yes, yes, it did. It really did. I think, it's important to reflect and see. I think I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why I did the things I did, because at the end of the day, like I said, there was nobody else forcing me to do anything. It was my choice to get married. It was my choice to stay, and then it was my choice to leave. So I think I spent a lot of time these last 2 years really figuring out what was it inside me that agreed to those things, because I'm not schizophrenic. It was still me, right? And I was coming up with really really believable reasons, and brushing things under the rug. And so really needed to figure out that piece of myself. What were the things in my mind, that how did I rationalize this, and to this extent, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like you had mentioned, you and your ex coming out of the relationship had no car, no house, no kids, and so I think the perspective of some that are potentially curious about the You What podcast will say is that, well, Kanika's divorce was less complicated than others, and why is she doing a podcast so soon after the divorce? What would you say to those people?
Uh, well, I think, first and foremost, I don't think anyone can say how complicated or easy or anything anyone else's experience was, because A, you don't know how much they're sharing. You don't know what they've been through. And to an extent, on one level, yes, I don't have children. If I had children, I'm sure that would be more complicated. If we had a house, I'm sure that would be more complicated to divide. Also, we don't have a house and a car because we live in Manhattan. I just wanted to put that out there.
And
Because
for
I
the
realize
folks
like it really
for
does sound like I'm
yeah
living under a bridge somewhere, but it's not.
for the
It's not
folks
that bad.
that don't know, Manhattan is one of the most expensive places to live in the world. So
And it's pretty common to be renting, right until the age of 30 or something. It's not as unheard of as I'm making it sound. um but so I think I would say first up that everybody's experience is different, and people will share different amounts of information that doesn't really, you don't really know what someone's been through. And second, I think I would also say the reason I'm doing a podcast so soon is relative to who you're asking, but so soon is because I want this content out there because it wasn't there when I was going through this. And every year or years that we wait, there's other people going through it, and if it makes even one person's life happier or day brighter, I think it's a success. I think it's a win. And to be honest, ever since I started interviewing guests, I feel like it's a lot of my own therapy, honestly, because I'm asking a lot of questions, and it's making me think about a lot of things that I didn't before. And there are some episodes deal with resources that I wish I had when I was going through that. Some of them are, very like technical, like finding lawyers and immigration and things like that. But others are more, uh, psychological and just kind of figuring out whether what are some signs you're in a toxic relationship, things like that. So these are things I wish I had, and I think that's what I keep in mind when I'm doing this podcast. I will also add that for sure I would love to talk about topics that have not affected me, such as how to talk to your kids about divorce. But I think I'm gonna first dip my toes in the water with subjects that I am comfortable with speaking about, and I think over time definitely also address topics for other people. And like, for example, I'm a heterosexual woman, but I want to also use the platform to talk about what the dissolutions of other kinds of relationships look like. Right now they can get divorced, but that was only recently, as of I believe 2014 or 2015. So yeah, I think that what would I, why am I doing it so soon? Because I wish it should have been done sooner. I wish it was out there for me. So if it's not, I want to maybe add value to somebody else if I can.
you want to be a pioneer of thinking about divorce in a bit more fun way. And that's a question that I wanted to get to, because you do say that this is meant to be a fun podcast. And for a lot of people, they're going to do a double take when they see fun and divorce in the same sentence. And as you were talking about some of the topics in upcoming shows, I mean, they do seem a bit serious. So, what will be the approach of the show that makes it fun?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. um on one hand, I want, by fun I mean, approachable and relatable for somebody of our generation. And by that I mean not only talking about the serious aspects of a divorce, but also, silly questions like how do you go on, it's not actually silly, but it's how do you go on that first date? What do you do? How do you talk about going out after, all these years? Like, where do you even, all your photographs, by the way, this person's in all your photographs. Like, where do you even start? You have no pictures, you're trying to get on an app. It's like, it's a lot of them, you're right, are more serious topics. But I think by virtue of just me being the person I am and asking the silly questions that I do, it just kind of lightens it a little bit. And uh and I think that's kind of fun. And I think it's fun to explore other topics with guests and and sort of understand what it's like. And another, the reason why I also called it fun is because a podcast about divorce, Chris, sounds depressing. Like, it just sounds sad to me, you know? And I want people to find other fun, interesting value. It's not a depressing podcast about divorce. It is about divorce because I want to bring light to the fact that divorce should actually be associated with something that could be more fun. But if I call it just a hilarious podcast about dating, it's just another hilarious podcast about dating out there. There's so many of them. So I want to touch all these topics through the lens of divorce, and I want to make it fun. And how is it fun? Because the topics that we talk about, right? We talk about uh, like non-monogamy, and of course I have researchers, and it's a more, let's just say, it's a more well researched lens. It's not just, me and my best friend sitting here saying, like, I think I would like three partners, I think I would like five, although that sounds like a great topic. I should probably do that. But it's informed voices, but it's interesting topics that we all want to talk about. Not something that you it's not a dusty old divorce book in the corner that it's like, on chapter 3, sell the house. Like, that's I just want it to be like more relatable. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you're laughing. It's funny. It's fun.
Now, you did get married at 23 and divorced at 27. In retrospect, would you have gotten married at 23, knowing what you know now, or should you have waited longer? Do you think the relationship with the person you were with might have lasted if you had
No,
waited?
no, it wouldn't have. But it would be stupid of me to say, knowing everything I know, would I go back and make the same mistake? I don't actually. No, 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 wait a sec. I take that back. I wouldn't call it a mistake. But would I do the same thing if I knew what I knew now? No, I wouldn't, because I know that that was not the person for me. But do I, like, if I didn't know what I knew now, I it was a great experience. I would never want to take that away from my life, because I cannot tell you how much it taught me about myself and how quickly it grew me. And had I not had that, I don't know, maybe I don't know where I'd be, right? That there are so many possibilities. But maybe this some of the things that I know now would have taken me 20, 30, 40 years to learn. And it was like me just kind of speeding it up and really, like, learning a lot of things really quickly. And I feel like I'm so, 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 so grateful that that happened then, because I feel like I'm so much more informed and I have all these tools. And I felt like I was asleep. I was walking this earth, eating, drinking, going to sleep, like watching, like I was doing everything. I was working, but I was just kind of like, I wasn't aware. I wasn't really consciously aware of the life that I have, and like aware of what I'm doing. And I don't know, maybe 5 years from now, I'm going to turn around and say the same thing about me now. But it certainly woke me up and made me realize a lot about myself. So I don't know that I could ever say, I wouldn't do it again.
How did you meet your ex, and what led you to say yes to marriage?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we actually met at a bar, but there were many factors that led me to saying yes. I had just graduated school, or a year or two after school. I was alone here in that, like we mentioned, I don't really have family here. I had a few friends, and slowly a lot of them left. My ex, his family and everybody was here, so it was very easy. It felt very familiar to me, because I'm used to being around, family, and I'm just used to that kind of an environment. So especially in New York, it's pretty rare to have, your spouse's family here too. A lot of people aren't actually from here. So that was immediately a very warming, familiar part that made me want to marry him. But also, he's still alive, charming person, and we had some really fun times. But the whole thing did happen really quickly. And looking back now, I can see the red flags, and looking back now, I know that that's a sign, and yada yada yada. But at the moment, I was 23. It seemed really fun. I felt like I was making the right decision. And And I was like, okay, like why not? This makes logical sense. Like he's working, he's this, he's that, and it just made sense logically in my head. And I don't think I gave it enough time to really let the dust settle and figure out things. And when things happen too quickly, you don't give yourself time to process them. And when things are not aligned, when there are red flags but they're happening all so fast, I think you also kind of just brush it on the rug because it's incongruent with what you're seeing, so you just want to ignore it. I think I was also honestly a lot less mature then than I am now. So my answer to all these questions, evolves the more time passes. And that's why I find it's a very difficult thing to answer when someone asks, oh, why'd you get married? Oh, okay, then why'd you get divorced? And it's like, oh my God, but like, I can tell you why I got married then, but now I know that now. So it's a very layered question and a very layered
Yeah,
answer.
it's a very nuanced, well thought out interview question. uh, I'm being silly, but it, the aspect that I was potentially interested in exploring without getting into the specifics of your relationship are, what are some red flags that people in relationships should look out for or should be mindful of?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm happy to list them all. How much paper do you have? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
I've spoken to a lot of therapists and I've listened to a lot of therapists, and I'm huge into self help and self development. So I think the last 2 years I should have probably just started writing a book on everything that a book of resources. That's what I should have written. But some of the big ones, just it depends on the types of problems. Obviously, like if the person has an addiction, like needles are a red flag. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the more insidious red flags that we don't really recognize. I talk about this on my podcast a lot. That serious happens in our heads. It's always that's a hard line. It's like, oh my God, this happened, so I'm out. Do you know what I mean? But in fact, those don't just happen out of the blue. And it's not only it doesn't have to go there for it to be a bad thing. There are so many transgressions that happen along the way that we just brush under the rug for a variety of reasons. Some of them are also reinforced by society. I'll give you a bunch of examples. Like if things are going too fast too quickly, that's a huge red flag. If they don't have any other friends except you, or all their relationships have been broken in general over the past, like, we're all between 25 to 35 years old. You should have friend, at least one friend that's been your friend for more than 5 or 7 years. If you haven't, that's a red flag. You want to think about why don't they have any other friends, right? You want to think about small things, like how do they make you feel? Are they gaslighting you? Are they belittling you? How do they treat you when you're when it's behind closed doors, when it's not in public? How do they talk about the finances? How open are they? How, honestly, small things like how respectful are they? How communicative are they? How do they react? When do they respond or do they react when something happens? That's a huge difference. Can you sit down and talk to them without feeling like you're walking on eggshells? It sounds, these are all leaning towards a more toxic relationship, but just to give you a general idea, I mean, these are all things. If the person makes you feel uncomfortable, if you start questioning yourself, that's a huge red flag. If you're constantly thinking, am I good enough? Am I doing this right? That's a red flag. No one should make you feel that way, especially not the one person that's supposed to be your partner. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're wondering about who this person is sleeping with, are they sleeping with someone? Are we a thing? Are we not a thing? It's a red flag. You should know. If it's a yes, you should know. If it's an I don't know, if it's a maybe, then you got that. That's a problem. But I think we don't want to talk. We don't want to admit it because we have, all of us bring our own insecurities to the table, and a lot of it is self defense mechanism. So there's a lot there, but I don't know if is that helpful.
No, relationships are certainly complicated. And what was the point? Well, you don't have to say the actual event, but where was it where you just said enough, and this relationship can't really move on?
Yeah. The reasons for a relationship ending, one of my guests say this a lot, is never really one thing. It's often all these small little things. It's like death by a thousand paper cuts, right? So the reasons for it ending were actually strewn in the years of marriage, and the things that the things you forgive, and then you have the same argument again and again. So the actual reasons were that, but the moment that was enough is enough is, for me, it was when I caught myself apologizing for something I didn't do. And that that really, something went off in my brain, and it was like, either I'm gonna go crazy, or I had a flash, honestly, Chris, of my life, and I was like, either I'm just gonna lie to it's just crystal clear. Are you gonna lie to yourself anymore or not? It's that clear. And then the other thing I will say is, life, the universe, maybe this sounds a little bit woo woo and out there for you, but I believe this: you keep getting signs in your life and you keep ignoring them. Oh, Oprah talks about this a lot, actually. And if you keep ignoring them, the sign, they're just going to get worse and worse and worse. First it's a whisper, then it becomes a nudge, then it becomes a tap, then it becomes literally a whole brick wall falling on you, not physically but metaphorically. And so, you have to listen, and if you don't, it's going to continue until it's so loud and clear. And then in that moment, you make a decision. Are you going to live with yourself being this way, or are you going to be honest to yourself? It's really not about anybody else. Can you continue this lie in your head for yourself? And lie is, well, I don't know if that's the right word, but this, the things we tell ourselves, it's just so, it comes to a point where you have to pick, and that you decide your life, you decide your fate. Then you decide how can you live, can you do that. Probably you can't. It's very scary. It's really, really scary. It takes a lot of courage, I think, more than, I don't know, there are other things that are considered courageous, but I feel like being honest with yourself about these kinds of things, and really admitting that when there's a lot of stuff on the line, a lot of stuff at stake, that not just people's money, but other people's investments, emotions, anything. It takes a lot of courage to say, I can't do this anymore, and I'm out. And I think that, to bring it back to what you were asking me originally, I have grown up playing sports, and I have these values, and I grappled for a very long time with the idea of, am I quitting? Am I giving up? Am I a quitter? How can I just give up? Like, what can I do better? Do you know what I'm saying? But again, it comes to a point where you have to decide, are you going to pick yourself, and are you going to stand up for yourself, and are you going to be honest with yourself, or are you not? It's there's no, like, there's no gray area. It's pretty clear. And I think at that's when I knew, okay, I can't do this. Like, I have to be honest with myself. And then I knew, does that make any sense?
Oh, definitely. There just comes a point where you feel like you're not you anymore necessarily, and
Yeah.
that the relationship is a hindrance to your growth and to your development as a person. So certainly, yeah. Now, I've noticed just in life that sometimes when relationships break up, uh, the people who are in the relationship still remain friends, still remain close. Are you still in touch with your ex?
No.
And that's interesting because coming out of the divorce and based on this conversation, you do sound happy. Do you think there will be an instance where you will ever communicate again?
No. I assure you there will not. But I think I'm a happy person, Chris. I think that a lot of people say this, and actually, one of my therapists, well, one therapist, I had one, but she actually told me, I'd never been to therapy before, and I was like, okay, God, this is like, if ever one needs to go to therapy, it's now. So I went, and she kept saying, you don't seem like you're, you don't, not that I don't seem sad, but I'm not expressing emotion. I was like, you don't understand. Like, there's two aspects to it. One is, like, I've already felt the heartbreak, pain, tears, whatever, of all during all the years when those fights were taking place. Do you know what I mean? Or the disagreements were taking place. But I do feel like I'm a genuinely just a really happy, genuinely optimistic leaning person. So I don't know. I think it was a great. I think you have to just kind of take what you can from the situation, and I'm so grateful that it happened. Honestly, so I don't think that I would, speak to my ex necessarily, not of my own choice for sure, but I'm not. I don't. well, I don't think I hate him. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I recognize you see how hard that was for me to even get out of my mouth. No, I recognize that we're all people, and sometimes I may feel bad for him because I these are my ways of talking to myself. So I have to come up with some. So I don't think I think hate is a waste of my own energy. I think if you hate anybody and if you're angry at anybody, it has nothing to do with that person. You're just draining yourself. The other person doesn't even know about it or like doesn't really care, honestly. So if you carry hate and anger, then you're hurting yourself, really. That's what it is.
One of the reasons why I had asked that is because I'm pretty confident this show will build an audience and you're going to gain fans. And I, I'm pretty confident that at some point you're going to have a listener reach out to you and ask, can your ex be a guest on the You What podcast? So what will your response be?
It will be no. It will be absolutely not.
Oh, absolutely not. Okay. And
No,
why why
we're
might
not.
why
We're
might
not
that be
on.
though? I
Well,
mean that's interesting.
we're not on talking terms. We're not in touch. I think, like you said, some people stay friends and some don't, and I think we didn't. So no, nope.
I think one of the things that I find interesting is that you do want to rebrand divorce, and one of the ways of going about doing that is exploring that potentially in the future. So maybe somewhere down the road, maybe not now, but you know 4 years from now, when you're the number one podcast in relationships, or you're in the top of the charts, maybe it's something you'll consider.
I'll give you that. Sure. Never say never, but
Yeah, never say never.
never
Exactly.
say never. You're right, but I guess maybe I'll go with I'll go with the too soon for right now. Maybe it's still too soon, but for me to get through that, because at the end of the day, it was a difficult experience. I had to have boundaries. And for me, it's like some people in relationships, when they break up, like they have to block their ex, and that's what you have to do for you. You just have to do it. Maybe 3 years later, you unblock them, and like, I don't know, maybe you are friends on Facebook. I'm not really sure, but for me, especially given the relationship, and then how I had to leave and all this kind of stuff, there was just a lot going on in my life, and I had to put these hard boundaries in place for my own protection, essentially, and not from like not a physical threat, but just to my own like mental sanity. And I think that you're right. Maybe a couple of years from now, perhaps I might feel differently about it. Sure.
But I mean, above all else, putting your health above calls from the fans or the interest of fans. Obviously, your personal well-being and mental well-being should come first. So we'll stay with, as of right now, no to the being on the You
I'll
What
reach out to
podcast.
you. I'll reach out to you when I have too many fans and I run into this fan problem. But right now, it's a non-issue.
Well, I mean, like I said, you're already ranking in Apple Podcasts in India, so I think we're just around the corner. It's gonna be like a steam train barreling down the tracks. It's gonna
I
come
hope
quickly.
so. I mean, that's really kind of you to say, but it's an interesting place to be before, because when launching you've been working on this for a while. This idea has been so this was another thing, this was another example in my life that kept tapping me, and then it slowly poked me for 2 years, basically. I toyed with the idea, then I pushed it away. Eventually I realized, okay, this is it. Like, I have to do this. It's not really an option, it's going to be done. Um, but you spend a lot of time before it launches. So for me, I've been living this podcast life, I guess, for 4 months or 5 months, and like in the weeds, in the thick of it, right? But you don't know. It's like I mean, I haven't done this ever, but I imagine it's like carrying a child, and then until you birth it, it's like only yours, and then all of a sudden it's like I have no idea what's gonna happen. It's cool. It's interesting. How
So
is it for?
there's a bit of nervous energy then.
I think so, but I also read somewhere that if something makes you nervous, it means that you might care.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you want to be invested in the show, or there's no point in doing it. So, the fact that you are nervous about it and how people are going to receive the first dozen or so shows you've already recorded, that speaks to the fact that you want it to be successful.
We'll wait. We'll have to see. Let's see how it goes.
Now, you had mentioned that in doing the show, it's somewhat therapeutic. And you also mentioned that you've seen a counselor. A potential criticism that will come about, because I'm trying to think of all the potential scenarios tied to the release of the show. One of
Mm-hmm.
the potential criticisms is that, as you had mentioned, there is this void in the marketplace. There isn't really a lighthearted, fun, engaging podcast about divorce. And since you are the initial person in the market filling that gap, some might say, well, maybe it should have been a licensed counselor hosting this show, or a licensed counselor should have been a co-host who has expertise advising people. So what would your response be to that sort of potential criticism?
I think that we're living in a time where everybody has something to say. There are episodes that I do have licensed counselors and divorce lawyers. Like I have an immigration attorney giving advice on immigration. I don't have, a painter talking about immigration. So, I mean, with everything, like there's
But that
some
would be
level of
interesting. That would be a
like
good
it
show.
would be, it probably would, because there are probably very many immigration painters, and that's a great niche. Now you got me thinking. But the whole point is like I believe that you can't listen to everybody's gonna have things to say, good and bad. So there's no point in me getting dragged down by comments of somebody who says I should have, would have, could have. But like, why don't you do something and then we'll talk about it? You know what I mean? Like, for the most part, I think that people are going to realize, like, if you're listening to an immigration attorney talk about immigration, that sounds interesting, maybe listen. If you're listening to a therapist talk about, I don't know, narcissism, maybe listen, because she knows what she's talking about. So, people have, I think that people just love picking and A, being spoon fed, but then on the flip side, B, also being very nitpicky. And it's like, I'm not claiming to be a therapist. I'm claiming to talk about divorce and have people on who can share information about that. So that's that. And I think that part of being, putting content out publicly is receiving all kinds of feedback. And I haven't done that yet. I'm curious to see how that'll go. That's definitely something I think about, and I'm aware of. So I'm not really sure how I'll handle it because I haven't done that yet. But if I had to guess, I think I would try to just let the small things go, and sort of, I mean, I hope people have the common sense to understand that, but you never know.
Well,
What's your advice?
common sense and the average person.
It's not as common.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in terms of just life in general, how have the last 2 years shaped you? How has the pandemic era living in New York impacted you psychologically?
Yeah, I think it's been the best 2 years of my life, honestly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I say that, I mean, listen, when I left, it was whatever, January 2020, right? Just pre-pandemic. So the thing is, I quit my job because we were gonna, like, I was gonna do something else. So I didn't have a job. I didn't have a house because obviously it was his apartment. And I also was getting divorced. So, there was a lot going on. And I joke about this on my podcast, but I always say that, I had so many things that were not working out that I just couldn't focus. I couldn't dwell on any problem too long. So that kind of helped me from going really down a deep spiral, because just as I would like panic too much about not having a place to live, I'd be like, actually, why don't you panic about not having a job? Or how about the pandemic? So do you know what I mean? That was, and again, I'm a light and humorous person, and I find things funny, and I think I'm optimistic, but that's the pandemic really changed my life for the better, but it taught me a lot to kind of, it made me realize how much I can do for myself. Yeah, that's what it is. I like to believe we're, towards the end of it, let's say coming out of it, so to speak, and my faith and my ability to support myself and just do everything for myself is remarkably, I mean, it's an entirely different level altogether. And I think for most people, because we went in kind of panicked and not knowing, and then you slowly settle down, you realize like, okay, I'm with me. Can I make myself eat? Can I take care of myself? And then what is that? And like learning to spend time by yourself. I honestly am kind of introverted. It doesn't often seem like that, but I recharge by being alone. I also live in a part of New York that's relatively has a lot more open space. So I spend a lot of time walking around outside. And really it gave me a lot of time and space to think about my life and think about what I want. I don't know that I have any answers for those as yet, but it was the best time for me. I mean, of course, there were things like everybody. I wish, I spent more time with family. I wish I could be around family, especially with the pandemic, having outbreaks at different parts of the world at different times. That was kind of stressful. Seeing, the huge outbreak in India and me being here, it's stressful. And then, vice versa, having the huge outbreak in New York, and then everyone being like, are you alive? And I'm like, yeah, actually, I'm doing fine. But, it's, I feel grateful and lucky that no one that I know personally has suffered a loss during the pandemic. So maybe that's also tainting my perception of it. But I'm overall really happy, and I think I've come out a new person.
Do you anticipate living in New York the rest of your life?
I don't know. Maybe. I think so. I mean, definitely for the next few years. It really depends on my life path. If I meet somebody, it would really depend on where they're from. I don't know if I want to have kids, but if I did, I think that's a point at which people consider leaving New York. And then, with things changing and everything being more remote, I'm not sure if I continued, but I would perhaps maybe go live elsewhere for a little while, not tie myself down. It is expensive to live here. I do love the city. But so my answer is I really don't know. I wish I did.
Because that's the interesting part in terms of uh, relationships ending. Because another thing I've encountered with friends who have ended relationships is that where the relationship took place, not only do they find it necessary to break away from that person, but they want to break away from that area. So they move on, not just in terms of the relationship with the person, but the relationship to the community, the area, and they start fresh somewhere else. And so I was just curious in terms of your thinking as to whether that was necessary.
I mean, that sounds nice in the beginning, but I think it wasn't an option. That I was literally locked down in the city that this all happened.
Yeah,
So
that's the unique part about the pandemic era.
yeah, and I think, it sort of forced me to rip that band-aid off. That's how I look at it. And I don't have any ill will or bad feelings. Of course, like I don't live in the same neighborhood. Would I go hang out there? Probably not. I mean, it just doesn't give me good vibes. But, I've been around there, and sometimes you need to go and do stuff in some areas. But yeah, I think for me, that's not even, it's a non-issue because there was no other option. I mean, no one cared if I wanted to go into the neighborhood where my ex lived. People were more like, are we going to survive? So it just, in the grand scheme of things, I feel like I'm sure people have valid reasons, to feel that way. For sure, I can totally understand, but I don't think it wasn't an option.
Well, Kanika, is there any final message or something that you would like listeners of the Great A Nation to know about you or the podcast?
Well, Chris, I just first want to say thank you so much for having me on and just letting me talk your ear off. My mom always, she's surprised that people actually want to do this, and like she's been subject to this for years. So thank you so much. I want them to hopefully listen to you what and let me know want feedback, and I want to hear if it resonates and if it makes sense, and if they think it's funny or if they don't think it's funny. And I want them to share it with people, and I want them to remember that when people get divorced, it's a very difficult thing for them to, it's a courageous thing for them to do, and everybody's experience is different, so we can never really project, but we can support them, and their life isn't over. And like, if you're on a dating app, just because someone's divorced, that doesn't mean they're not good. You know what I mean? Like change how we think about that, because that might be one of the best, like that might be like an amazing person. And I'm not saying that everybody has this weird stigma, but I just think that it's totally okay. And I think the more we destigmatize it, the more people are going to be empowered to, not stay in things that are abusive, harmful, hurtful. But also, it doesn't have to be all those things. It can just be not perfectly happy, and that's also okay. So I just think that people should just relax a little bit and don't prejudge anybody, kind of support them in whatever they're trying to do. And also, people can change their minds and change their opinions, and you can change, and you can want something, then you can also not want it, and that's all okay. And I think that we should just be a little bit more empathetic towards everybody, because we don't really know what someone's going through.
Definitely. And your usage of the word resonates, I'm smitten, because that's one of my favorite words. And listeners of Great A Nation will know that,
Oh,
because
that's
I,
so
I use that
funny.
I use that word a lot.
That's
It's
that's hilarious, because we didn't plan that.
yeah. You couldn't have scripted it any better. So Kanika Issar is the host of the You What, and it's a interesting podcast name to pronounce because there's a question mark and two exclamation points at the end. So you kind of feel obligated to say, "You what?"
Exactly. And that's the response people say, because when I tell them, hey, I got divorced, it's like, you what? Like, it's just shocking. What? It's just so unbelievable. But is it, So that's the idea. Like, I wanted it, the what has to be like emphasized.
So you can't really say the You What podcast. You have to say the You What podcast.
Exactly. I love that. Exactly.
And I encourage people to give the show a chance, even if you're someone that hasn't experienced divorce. There's going to be subject matter that's going to be covered, relationships that will intrigue you. Visit the youwhatpodcast.com. There's going to be a whole slew of episodes. And as you can see, Kanika has a positive spirit about her, great personality. She has the characteristics of a great host. So give the show a shot. Great A Nation. I encourage you, check it out. Take care.